Without further ado, I would like to introduce Krista Christensen. She is with Fidelity National Title Legal Department. She's been there for over 11 years and has multiple roles within the claims department. I hope I introduced you properly. I think you are an attorney, if I'm not mistaken.
I am.
Okay. I wanted to make absolutely sure before I made that disclaimer. Really appreciate you fitting us in today. We look forward to everything that you got to tell us. I mean, we're all kind of anticipating your comments and learn from what you have to offer us. So take it away, Krista. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank you guys for listening to me. So what I'm going to talk about today, which I hope that, let's see here, just have, as long as I have the right screen there. Are you guys seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. What I'm going to talk about today is something that unfortunately is plaguing the real estate industry. And for the last 3 years, it's been my life, unfortunately. That's how much it has influxed into the real estate world. And that is wire fraud occurring through business email compromise. And I word it that way because a lot of times transaction participants hear wire fraud and right away they assume, oh, this is just an escrow issue. And that's not the case. What the fraudsters are doing is they're gaining access through email compromise. And so I think it's very important. Anytime, that's the end result. Wire fraud's the end result, right? That's the damage and the devastation that occurs typically to buyers. Buyers are over 70% more likely to be the victims of this crime. Okay, that's how much they are going after the buyers. They're the most vulnerable, the most, the least informed and educated about what typically happens in a real estate transaction. And so the fraudsters are going after that. They know that. Okay, so we want to, in order to change that end result and try and minimize that, because remember, that's all we can do is minimize it. We cannot eliminate wire fraud from occurring in real estate transactions. As much as we wish we could, the problem is there's too many different participants. There's too many, you can't control how another participant, how they use their email, what emails they respond to, what type of security they have, what type of email system they use and rely on. And all of those are factors as to why we can't eliminate it, right? So what we need to do is bring awareness and education. And so that's what I'm hoping to do for you all today. So how is it happening then? How is it getting in? It's getting in through, wait a second, it's not turning here for me. Wait a second. I'm having a problem issue too. There we go. All right. It's like frozen. There we go. All right. So how are the fraudsters getting in? They're getting in through what's called business email compromise. Okay. Now, what is that? That is just a fancy name for a sophisticated fraud scheme that's regularly targeting those who wire transfers. So that's the real estate industry in a nutshell, right? And how do they do that? They do that variety of ways, but everyone's involved. Buyers, sellers, agents, whether you're the listing or the selling, mortgage brokers, escrow officers, everyone is used in this fraud scheme. Okay, so what do the fraudsters do? The fraudsters, they get in a couple of ways, but the main way what they do is they troll the internet like crazy, right? So they'll go to Zillow, Flipkey, LoopNet, Realtor.com, all of those sites, and they do that to see what's on the market. Remember, all of those sites get an IDX feed from the MLS about every 5 minutes, right? So anytime there's a new property listing, every time a property status is updated, any of that information is transferred to those other websites, right? Well, what other information is on those websites? The listing agent's information, not to mention a whole bunch of marketing ads for everyone that's involved in the real estate market, whether it be a mortgage broker, a real estate agent, any of that, that's all there, right? So the fraudsters then take that information and they do a deep dive. So they're going to look up whoever's information they find on the internet. They're going to go ahead and look into their social media accounts. They're going to see what's information they have on them. They're going to find a way, and at that point, then they start spear phishing that individual. Okay, so let's say they'll go to your social media site and see that you're part of the California Association of Realtors. They'll go ahead and send you an email that looks like it is from California Association of Realtors. It'll be what's called a spoofed email. That's how most of this is occurring, is through spoofed emails and social engineering. I equate spoofed emails to imitation handbags. They look a lot like the real thing. There's just some slight variations, right? So instead of krista.christensen@fnf.com, it's krista.christensen.fnf@gmail.com. Or instead of jacksmith@ymail.com, it's Jack Smith, where they replace the I in Smith with a lowercase l @ymail.com. Things of that nature. And the reason why spoofed emails are so successful and so hard to recognize is a lot of us are using this to read emails and to draft emails, right? And the only thing that shows up is the name, not the actual email address. Not to mention is we are a society of skimmers. We don't really read anymore and pay attention to that. So what I'm hoping at the end of this is that we all kind of remember, deep breath, slow down, and the details matter, right? So what do they do when they get in? So when the fraudsters do gain access, and what they'll do is, they'll send you guys an email. Who all has Amazon? Pretty much everyone, right? How could we get through COVID without Amazon, right? If you have Amazon, you have been spearphished. At some point, you get an email that looks like it came from Amazon, and it says, we need to update your credentials. Please click this link. And if you click the link, it's going to take you to another website, and it's going to ask you to put in your username and your password. Okay? Well, that's what the fraudsters are doing here too. They're saying, we need you to update your information with the California Association of Realtors. Please click this link. And then it'll take you to a substitute website that captures all your data. And they're using that then it's called credential phishing. And they're using that then to gain access to your email accounts. Okay? So once they do that, they sit like a spider in the corner and they gather every bit of information they can on every single transaction that target is involved in. Doesn't matter if they're the listing agent, the selling agent, they could be the mortgage broker, could be the escrow officer, it could be the title officer, whoever it is. They look at every single transaction and then they sit and wait. Gather information, and then they determine who the victim's going to be. More than likely, it's going to be your buyer. And they are going to send email pretending to be someone else in the transaction. More than likely, they're going to pretend to be the escrow officer. Why? Because they know that the escrow officer gains a lot of information and has a lot of communications, right? That initial communication is more than likely not going to have wire instructions off the bat. It's going to be a lure them in, right? They're going to give you, they might actually copy an actual email that is going back and forth between a real estate agent, closing attorney, the lender, and the escrow officer. But then they just add in the buyer. They tend to do what I call stack spoofing, which is not a technical term. It just makes sense for me. And that's when they put multiple spoofed emails, addresses on that one email chain, but the only legit email address is actually to the victim. And then they make up a false one for the selling agent, for the mortgage broker, for the escrow officer, and those are all included in. Now, why do they take the time to do that? Because as soon as a buyer sees all those names on there, they automatically believe it's legit, right? So then eventually those fraudulent wire instructions will come out. They're for a domestic US account that is in some way managed by the fraudsters, and then eventually they'll go ahead and say, you need to send the money now. And right now, due to COVID, I want you all to be aware, I do have, I can't remember if I kept in the example or not, but there is, they're using COVID against us. They're saying that closing funds need to be sent even earlier due to delays because of COVID. They're also saying that cashier's checks can't be accepted because we're trying to minimize the amount of paper that's transferring as part of closing. Make sure your buyers, the best thing to do is talk about it as often as possible. Before the contract's even signed, start talking to your clients about those closing funds, wire instructions, how they are provided to you, what to expect, things of that nature. Okay, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen the fraudster reach out to the buyer pretending to be the escrow officer before a file is even opened with the escrow officer. All they did was use the information from the contract and reached out pretending to be that person to the buyer in an efforts to get their EMD. Okay, so, and once that money goes to that mule account, it is within 24 hours, it is sent internationally through multiple wires, and the likelihood of recovery is nil, unfortunately. Okay. So another way the fraudsters are getting access is through just general phishing emails. Remember that these fraudsters, it's highly lucrative for them. They're willing to spend money to steal other people's money. So they will pay marketing firms for all of your guys' contact information, and they do that. They say, give me all of the, real estate related entities and businesses and individuals in a certain region. They'll pay for that information. They do it under the guise of having a product that they want to then market to you. Instead, what they're then doing is sending emails like this, pretending to be large known businesses in the real estate market. And they'll send this email highly generic. The goal is they assume people are going too fast to really pay attention. And they want you to click this link so that they can once again gain access to your email accounts and start the scheme over. All right. Another thing is once they gain access to email accounts, they are using email rules more and more. How many of you on a regular basis check your email rules? Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. And that's what the fraudsters are counting on, right? 9 times out of 10, when people are notified that there may be apparent compromise in a transaction, the only step taken is to change their password, right? So what the fraudsters have done is now they've set up forwarding rules within that compromised email account. It benefits them in a couple ways. One, they only have to gain access to the account once, right? Then what they do is they go into their rules, set up an auto forward, which forwards all incoming emails to another email account that the fraudster has complete control over. Another benefit from the fraudster's perspective is email rules are not deleted when you change your password. So if that's the only step you take is to change your password, the fraudster still has complete access to the emails if that step has been taken. So I encourage you all on a regular basis to check your email rules and make sure there's nothing there that you did not set up yourself. If you do not know how to access your email rules in your email provider, Google is your friend. It'll tell you how to do it, or ask an IT person if they can help you do that. And I would recommend doing it, like I said, on a normal regular basis. Okay. This is an example of spoofed emails. Okay, I wanted you guys to see what your buyers are seeing. This is what's called a contact name spoof. This is where it'll say the person's name that they're portraying to be, in this case, me, right? It'll just say my name, and then it'll say an email address. And you'll see that that's a spoofed email address. That's the example that I provided you earlier, right? The problem is if someone is reading this on a mobile device, the only thing they're going to see is my name, Krista Christensen. That's the reason for the contact name spoof. We are seeing fraudsters use the same email addresses multiple times, and they're pretending to be multiple different people across multiple different states. A big one now is escrowtitleagent@gmail.com and agentbroker@gmail.com. Okay, we're seeing that a lot. And the problem is it's like playing whack-a-mole, because as soon as we try and get one shut down by Google, first off, you have to show that there's a lot of people that have used it and there's a lot of intended victims. But then what they'll do is they'll just add a T at the end of agent. They'll put a T in the middle of title. So it really is whack-a-mole. It's like you try and shut it down and they just pop up with another one. But if you look at this email, everything in here is accurate. The fraudster gained access to this information through the mortgage broker or the buyer, and the mortgage broker provided the CD to the buyer with the final figure. And this happened a day and a half before any of this information was transferred to the escrow officer. Okay. And then the fraudsters used that information and attached the CD to this email, pretending to be the escrow officer. That's how legitimate it looks. That's how good it can look. And that's what these buyers they're falling for it, unfortunately. Okay. This is the new spoof scheme that we're seeing more and more of. It's more difficult to discern, and it's a little scary, to be honest. Because if you look at that upper left corner, there is no way for you to tell that that did not come from my email address. It's not until you look at the lower right corner when you hit reply that you actually see the spoofed domain of fn-f.com. How many of us pay attention to what domain shows up when you hit reply? Most of us don't. Do you? That Bobby, you're in the minority there.
Yeah,
and not only that,
yeah.
But if you're doing this, once again, it's only going to show up your name.
Right.
It's not going to show up an email address, right? So what's a way that you can get around this? Forward. If you reply, instead of hitting reply, hit forward. Type back in the contact information of who you want to respond to. I understand that takes a little bit more time. And if you have fat fingers, sometimes if you're working on a mobile device, it's a pain in the butt, right? But what that will do is, one, it will make sure you're really emailing who you mean to email and not let you respond back to a spoofed email. But two, it will also give you any notice if you've responded to a spoofed email in the past, because as soon as you start typing in that email address or that contact, remember, it's a smart device for a reason. It'll pop up anytime that you've sent an email address close and similar to that for that contact in the past. And if all of a sudden 2 emails pop up and you only know of one for your contact, you're like, whoa, something's wrong here. And so then that will allow you at that point to stop and notify everyone of the potential compromise. Okay. So because that's not bad enough, they can do caller ID spoofing. It's an app available on any phone. At any time, I can call any of you with any number, and I can change my voice from female to male as needed. Okay. I want you to think about how scary that is in a real estate setting when the likelihood of you recognizing people's voices is extremely low, especially if you're a buyer as related to like an escrow officer where you don't have as much contact. So remind your clients and yourselves, anytime you are verifying information, you should be the one calling the people you are trying to verify that information with through a known trusted number. Never rely on a number from an email. Once again, Google is your friend. Okay. They also do smishing. I just like that word. And that's when they're texting. The fraudsters will use any medium available, and they are. So they are starting to text your clients, pretending to be various parties, maybe even you. And they are saying wire instructions need to be changed. They're sending wire instructions via text. So make sure that you guys know the habits and the practices of the escrow officers that you guys work with, so that if something like that, most escrow officers, most Chicago title escrow officers will not provide wire instructions via text. Why? Text is not a secure method of transferring information, right? So go ahead and tell your buyers that up front. That way, if they get a text with wire instructions or changing something, hopefully the light bulb will go on and they'll pick up the phone and call you and say, what's going on? I thought they didn't do this. Any bit of information helps, okay? So I hear this all the time. Oh, this is never gonna happen to me. This doesn't happen here, right? These are just a small glimpse of what's happened. These are the numbers as reported from the FBI. And granted, the FBI acknowledges that they are not getting 100% reporting. They stated less than 30% is actually being reported. Look at those numbers. And by the way, BEC was over $1 billion more in losses than the next closest categories. The average robbery nets about $4,000. Every time I say that, I think of the movie Point Break, and I think of what they had to do to get that money. And I'm like, oh, no way. Right? The average BEC nets $140,000, and they do not have to get off their couch or wear pants. Which ones would you pick? That's why this isn't going away. Not to mention our reliance on technology more and more feeds right into their hands, right? So what does that mean? The good news is there's ways for us to recognize it and help minimize it. So that's what we just need to do, right? First thing to recognize is any money is fair game. There is no money too little or too large for the fraudsters. They'll go after anything. Okay? Started out in seller's proceeds and they've just gone from there. big one now is actually payoff fraud. So what they'll do is the fraudsters will pretend to be you or one of the seller, and they'll send an email to the escrow officer asking for a copy of the payoff so they can go over it with the seller before closing. And then they come back and respond back with a quote unquote updated payoff. And the only thing updated is actually the bank information. And that's their attempt to defraud and steal the payoff proceeds, because they realize that a lot of times that's a large chunk of change, right? So what are some common indicators? Bank changes. I can tell you now, escrow companies are not going to change bank information in the middle of a transaction for any reason. It does not matter. I've seen because of a fraudulent check being deposited, because of an audit. My personal favorite is because we're over our daily deposit limit. I didn't even know that was a thing, right? The fraudsters will give a lot of reasons. Make sure everyone is abundantly clear that if you are sending funds to the escrow company as a third party beneficiary, as the buyer, as a lender, whoever you may represent, it's never going to change for any reason. And it's never going to be an individual's name. Okay, those are important things to state and things that we take for granted, but buyers, since they aren't in this industry and they do this once every maybe 10 years, or maybe the first time they've ever done it, they just aren't aware of that, right? Be aware of your clients getting information and getting requests to wire on Fridays. Those fraudsters want that out before cutoff on Friday, because they want that weekend to be able to move those funds from that account before anyone can do anything about it on Monday. Or if it was a 3-day weekend, the following Tuesday. All right. Grammar changes. Okay, by now we're all aware of that email that has like the one sentence that's this long and the only thing capitalized is "and," right? We know something's wrong with that one. Well, if you have a client where English is not their first language, and all of a sudden they start writing to you in full proper English, that's also a red flag. Because the fraudsters are using chat rooms, they're copying, pasting communications from other transactions and inserting them in yours. So pay attention. Another thing that we also see a lot of, and this is just awareness for you all, is we'll see an email maybe 2 weeks into a transaction purporting to be from the escrow officer to one of the real estate agents asking for the buyer's contact information. Right, before we just respond, because we are customer service oriented and we want to do that, I want you guys to stop for a second and think if you already have been involved in email communications between that escrow officer and that buyer. Because that's more than likely, it's the fraudster attempting to gain access to their information so they can then send an email directly to the buyer trying to steal their funds. All right. What your buyers get is that pressure to take action. Boom, 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 boom. I've seen a fraudster attack a buyer and contact a buyer over 10 times within a 4-hour span. Did it via email, via phone calls, via text. All of them. You need to wire today. You need to wire today. Here are the wire instructions. You need to wire today. You need to wire today. Your buyers are going to do one or two things. They're going to call you and complain about your escrow officer bothering them so many times so that you can then call the escrow officer and eventually things get cleared up. Or more than likely, they are just going to wire the funds because they're sick of hearing from the person, and no one will find out about it until you're in closing 2 weeks from then, asking where their closing funds are. By that point, it's too late. All right. Sudden changes to business practices. If all of a sudden someone says, "Never call me again, only email me," you should pick up the phone and call them. Right. In this day and age, email is not something that we should be our sole reliance for anything, right? And now if someone does send an email to you, hey, saying all further communication should be through this email address, pick up the phone and call first. It may be legitimate. People change email addresses for a variety of reasons, but just verify it verbally before you just rely on it. This is the Corona diversion attempts that we are starting to see. We're seeing a lot of them say that due to Corona, due to COVID, funds need to be wired early to avoid closing delays, things of that nature. I just wanted you to be aware that this type of communications are going to your buyers. Okay. So what can we do? We need to rethink our communication. We need to educate at every opportunity. You guys have the most direct contact with buyers. So that's where us in the escrow world could really use your help to educate the buyers to what to expect. So I encourage you all to learn how your escrow officers, how they provide wire instructions, what their do's and their don'ts. I encourage you guys to not accept wire instructions from your escrow companies. Have that be a direct communication between them and your client. And the reason why is because email is pretty much like the electronic game of telephone that you used to play. Think about how many times things got messed up, the further down the chain it went. Well, that's what email is as it relates to email compromise and the fraudsters. Okay, so the more you can limit the transmission to people that directly need it, the more beneficial it is for everyone involved. Okay, communicate, and then really is we need to stop assuming. We assume, for some reason, we are the most distrustful as a nation as we've ever been, except apparently in email communications involving real estate, right? Where it asks for our life savings to be sent, we will rely solely on email. We need to stop assuming emails are legitimate. Okay, change our mindset to assume, not assume they're not legitimate, but just not assume they are until you prove otherwise. By checking the domain, by checking the email address, by maybe picking up and calling if it seems weird or it seems something contrary to what you've already been told, or it's trying to change something. All right. And whenever possible, I know this is 2020. I know people, we've got smartphones. We don't actually need to talk to people anymore. But Alexander Graham Bell created something great in 1876. It still works. And we should use it because that is one of the greatest defenses we have to this. Just pick up the phone and call. When in doubt, pick up the phone and call. All right. And I've already mentioned the limiting of the information. Okay. So what else can we do, right? That doesn't seem like much, right? Well, from an IT perspective, protect your house, right? Work with IT professionals and cybersecurity professionals. Make sure that you're patching, updating everything, okay? Use two-factor authentication. Make sure you have that enabled, not only for your work email, but any personal email accounts either, okay? It is important. It is imperative. People are asking if the worst happens and litigation ensues, that is something that's who got compromised is going to be part of the litigation. And in fact, Bain versus Platinum Realty Company in Kansas, the real estate agent and the brokerage firm were found 85% liable for the buyer's loss because they were the source of compromise. Okay, and what's interesting about that is it was the listing agent. Didn't even represent the buyer. Okay, but they were compromised. The fraudster sent the email from the listing agent's email account to the buyer with the fraudulent wire instructions. So they were ordered to pay $167,000. Okay, make sure complex passwords, you know, and we're all really good about, we don't duplicate those passwords across multiple domains, right? None of us do that, right?
Not anymore.
Remember, you know, password generators. They have, smartphones have them. There's a lot of cloud-based systems that have those. Think about using it. My memory isn't like it once was, right? I blame my kids. Others blame age. I think it was my kids that did it more than anything else, right? But just complex passwords. I actually, I have a music background. And so I actually think of songs and arias, and I use the first letter of each word of a phrase as my password, and then I add a superlative and a number to it. That way I don't have to write it down because I have the song memorized. And the likelihood of someone else knowing that aria and knowing what song I'm thinking of is extremely low. And make sure that you change that on a regular basis. Okay, and be wary of free Wi-Fi. Understand that there's something called man in the middle, that at any time it looks like you are looking directly into the Wi-Fi for Starbucks or even a hotel that you're at, but in fact, fraudsters have implemented man in the middle, and it captures all the information that you're inputting before it actually hits that Wi-Fi. So that could be your banking information if you're checking your bank. It could be if you're opening up and you're doing something with regards to your MLS and you're accessing your MLS account, things of that nature. All right. Remember that when you go to some place that you've previously had your Wi-Fi on for your smart device, turn it off if you don't need to use it. Otherwise, it'll auto connect. Same with monitor your Bluetooth. Make sure that only things that you are intending to have it attached to your Bluetooth are intended. If you're walking into Starbucks and all of a sudden your Bluetooth turns on and you have nothing attached to it, that's a problem. So those are the little things that you can pay attention to. And one thing for me to point out is, bottom line, we're human. So you can have the most robust IT department in the world and backing, and the bottom line is we're all somewhat a Pat. Pat is the person that clicks on every link, opens every attachment, overshares in communications, and that's what the fraudsters are going off of. All right. So be aware that we're humans and that happens. But avoid sending sensitive information via standard email. Okay. If you don't have the ability to encrypt or secure those communications, don't send it via email. Provide the title and escrow companies with your buyer's contact information. Okay. Make sure they know how to get in contact with them. They're not trying to take you out of it. They're trying to get direct contact with that buyer as soon as possible in the transaction so they can let that buyer know what to expect with regards to wire instructions. Okay. I've already mentioned this. Forward rather than reply to your new friend. Right. And then establish other communication channels. Think about setting up passwords, passphrases, things of that nature. That will also help with the caller ID spoofing and things of that nature. Now, it shouldn't be anything related to the property itself. Make it like a phrase. What color is your shirt? My shirt is pink. Something along those lines. But that'll help legitimize, and especially if you encourage your buyers or your clients, even if it's the seller, to maybe set something like that up with escrow, so that if all of a sudden escrow calls them, I can tell you right now, if Chicago Title is wiring seller's proceeds, they're going to call your seller and say, hey, can you verify these wire instructions for me? Well, your seller may be kind of wary about going ahead and providing banking information over the phone to someone that they maybe haven't really contacted before, right? So that passphrase may help that. Obviously, do that outside of email too, just an FYI. What we also want to think about is deleting unsolicited emails. Okay, you want to delete them or report them as spam as soon as you can. The reason why is because you want to purge your emails. Because the fraudsters will go through, if they do happen to gain access, they will go through and they'll look at things from your old emails and see new contacts that they can go ahead and try and gain access to. They might sign your banking information, things of that nature. And I cannot stress this enough. Never trust wire instructions sent via email. If you did not get it in hand, in person, from the person you are paying, pick up and call using a known verified number before wired instructions, and tell that to your clients, beat it into their head so that when push comes to shove and they're 48 hours before they're closing, they don't freak out if they get an email that tells them they must wire immediately, otherwise their closing will be delayed. And so they wire without talking to you first. It's never too early to have that conversation. And then consider implementing a standard warning. Now I know in California, you guys have the fraud as part of your contract, you know, that fraud alert, but also like in your email communications, have a warning. It's that important. It's happening that often. And I encourage you, don't use sentences because no one reads, right? Use bullet points. And I would put it above your signature line rather than below your signature line. Why? Because you're lucky if they get to your signature line, they're not getting below it, right? So make it part of the conversation rather than an afterthought. Also, these are wire fraud alerts that Chicago Title sends. The one on the left is one that gets sent to your buyers at any resale transaction, okay? Gets sent directly and exclusively to the buyer. All right, it has a place, it has their wire instructions, it has a place for them to acknowledge receipt. Now this may be sent a variety of different ways. It may be sent via smart mail. It may be sent through the smart portal. It may be sent during our new product start safe, okay? But this will be sent early on in the transaction. Make your buyers aware of that. Make your buyers aware that it will change. Go ahead and ask your escrow officers ahead of time what banks they bank at so that you can tell your buyers that information as well. Okay, so if they get a communication with a different bank, hopefully, once again, the light bulb comes on. right? The one on the right is just a flyer that any of you can get from any of your offices. It's there, it's provided, it's intended for the consumers so that they can write trusted numbers on it, so that they can refer back to that to verify any information prior to wiring any funds or providing any sensitive information via phone or email. Okay. Marketing. All right. You guys all need to market yourself, right? I just want you guys all to be aware of the risks associated with it. It's a risk reward system, right? And so we just need to be aware of what that means. So if you can, avoid what I term insta marketing. And that is when you go ahead and tag the buyer that's saying, final walkthrough today, closing is scheduled for tomorrow. The reason why is the fraudsters are probably following that because that's available and open for everyone. And then they're going to attempt fraud either on the buyer that night to get their closing funds or maybe even seller's proceeds the next day. We don't want to stop you from marketing yourself, but no one needs to know that that actually happened 2 weeks prior and that closing is already finalized. Right? So you can still market yourself, just wait until the transaction is closed before doing it. It makes it very obvious that it's fraud attempt when the buyer, who is now the owner, gets communication that says, hey, send me your closing funds to this email, to this bank. And they're like, we already own the house. What are you talking about? Right? That type of thing. Beware of that they will use information on the company websites against you. We're seeing a lot more influx of people sending emails asking for iTunes gift cards, things like that to be purchased, and they're pretending to be a boss to someone that's underneath them. So be aware of that. And out of office details, just remember, if you put out of office details on there, the fraudsters know exactly when you are out of the office. So be aware of that. Make adjustments. Pick up the phone, call people, remind them that you're going to be gone during that time and you won't be emailing. Start Safe. If you guys haven't been aware, that's our new digital opening package. It actually takes everything out. It's kind of, I refer to it like a TurboTax opening package. It pushes and gets information from the buyer without having to do a PDF that they then send unsecured back with all their information filled in. It sends them to a website portal that they put out the information. It also does contain our wire safe alert and that wire fraud, the wire instructions via that portal that they can print off and look at. And that takes it all out of email. And that's designed to try and minimize the effects of BEC and wire fraud, right? If one of your clients does become a victim, immediately they need to go back to their bank and issue a recall due to fraud. It's imperative that they indicate that fraud is involved, okay? Then they should go ahead, you guys notify your title escrow company, okay? Then they need to, your victim needs to go to the ic3.gov website and file a complaint. It's kind of like a black hole. I'm not going to lie, you won't get a response. I encourage people to print it off and then take it to the local police, local authorities in person after they've done it. Okay? Time is of the essence. So the sooner that they can get that done, the better it is for everyone. Okay? The Alta has a rapid response plan. If you haven't gone to the Alta website, I recommend going to it and then just on the search, just put in rapid response plan and it'll pop up the steps that you could take. Look, when this happens, everyone gets frantic and things go crazy, right? So if you just have that handy already and you have it saved, you can tell your client the steps to take in the most expeditious manner, right? So with that being said, the motto, inquire before you wire. That's what this campaign is. That's what WireSafe is. And that's what I'm hoping all of you will help get the message across to your clients in order to try and minimize the effects of this crime. I thank you all for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
Great. I don't have a question, but Krista, very well done. I appreciate it. Some of Bobby knows and some others know. I had a client about 2 months ago, and Chicago Title, I believe, was the title company. But long story short, when this exact thing happened to him, and when he got to the bank to wire $133,000, he had received an email from the escrow. It wasn't Chicago Title, just dawned on me. I forget which title company. He had received a spoof email from them and a spoof email from me. Mm-hmm. And mine said, have you wired your money yet? And when he went to the bank, he happened to remember me talking to him about this when he signed the wire thing that's in the contract. Because I always spend a couple minutes on that. I don't just say sign this and go on.
Good, you should.
I have a in-depth conversation with my clients. And he remembered that conversation. And while he was in the bank, he picked up his phone and called me and asked me, did you just send me an email? I said, no. Did you send me an email asking for if I've sent the funds? I said, no. And he told me what happened. I said, don't do it. And he came so close to sending $133,000. So that's made me even more aware of this. And I just want to thank you. I think every realtor in our industry should have been on this call today to hear this. And because it is real and it is happening, and we have to warn our clients. So thank you. Very well done.
Thank you.
Indeed, very well done indeed. Thank you so much, Krista. There's a lot of things that you touched base on that really hit home. Some of those practices I use, and like Judy has mentioned, what I do in my transactions, I preface the buyer once it gets down to EMD time and submitting that EMD, I have a conversation with them. You're going to receive a phone call from the escrow officer and then wiring instructions. Just make sure you confirm that you're talking to the right person and you have all that information in hand. And then I forward the escrow number and they verify the escrow numbers back and forth. So that's one step that I add. But really, really great presentation. I mean, if I'm allowed to, I'm going to petition my vice chair to invite you back in 6 to 8 months, sometime in first or second quarter of 21, and have you refresh this a little bit and kind of touch base on it. It was an excellent presentation. I do have one question. I have several questions actually, but I'm going to kind of limit my questions. What do you recommend now that we're all working from home?
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend as far as, I understand the two-factor authentication, switching passwords every 30 to 60 days and things of that nature. But what do you recommend that, the average individual, or even, the more savvy, individual, what can they do to protect their systems at home if they don't have the big IT firm?
Right. Well, one thing is make sure that you are regularly patching all your information, your networks, things like that. Remember that software goes out of date at an annoying rate, right? Constantly having to update things like that. Make sure you timely do that. Don't wait on doing your Apple updates or things like that. I know I'm notorious for it sometimes too. I'm like, I don't want to plug it in, or I forgot to plug it in and it happens up overnight. Do that on a timely basis because there are security aspects to all of that. Right. But the big thing is pay attention to the emails. You guys are in unfortunate position where most escrow officers know who they're going to be conversing with in a transaction, right? You guys build your portfolio by being contacted by people that you've never been contacted with before. So that, just knowing that puts you in an inherently higher risk factor, right? Because that makes phishing schemes more susceptible to you all. So try and be a little bit more selective about what you're doing. Because understand the fraudsters are getting in through social engineering. I mean, yes, there's still the, viruses that happen, things of that nature. So be leery about opening attachments. If you aren't expecting something, don't open it. Pick up the phone, call first. If you get an email from someone pretending to be a potential seller with a PDF, don't automatically open the PDF. Maybe see if there's a way that you guys can meet someplace and get in front of them and make sure that they're a real person.
Right. And
not just someone trying to fish, because unfortunately what the FBI is, they've been trying to draft a white pages for a while now, but they have fraudsters are pretending to be sellers and they're embedding PDFs with viruses and malware that allows them to gain access to your email accounts as soon as you click that PDF and open it. So right. Things of that nature. So really it's an awareness factor. I mean, from an IT perspective, make sure I would, even if you're at home, take the time to go to Real Geeks. The good thing is there's a lot of independent IT people, cybersecurity, but make sure it's not just like your mom and pop, oh yeah, I know how to reset passwords. Make it do your research and make it sure it's someone who understands cybersecurity, and pay the money to have them look at your system, look at your operating account, and look at your email account and see if there's anything that you can tweak to make it better, and then understand how the fraudsters are getting in, and that will help going forward.
So you touched base on, purging your emails.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to touch base on that because, some of us are notorious for having, 1,000 to 2,000 emails, and we go back and forth. Now, if we pull emails, I like to save everything in a file. So for a particular transaction and the client's name, if we move those into an archive folder in our Outlook,
they can still access it. I would suggest moving it to a cloud.
Moving it to a cloud. Okay, that's what I want.
Move it into a cloud storage instead of just, because if it's on your Outlook and it's right there and it's in your folder, if someone has access to your email account, they can open all those folders.
Okay, so those are still vulnerable as well.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and because sometimes actually that's what the fraudsters will do with their email rules, is sometimes they'll say, all right, all emails from fnf.com, I want you to bypass the inbox and go directly to one of these side folders. And then so then the fraudster can communicate with the party right out of that email with the actual account holder not knowing any of those communications are happening. So yeah, I would encourage you to, if not only that, but if you're legally required to keep certain documents for a certain period of time, I would suggest using a cloud-based system, so that a secure cloud-based system, so that you guys can move it out of your actual inbox. First off, it'll help your email go faster because that still counts towards your storage space and things of that nature. But then it'll make it so that they would have to know they add the password to that cloud as well to access any of that information.
Got it. Okay, good information. I do want to share one thing. So yesterday, my wife and I were traveling. We were in Los Angeles most of the day, and as we're traveling, we're in the car. I get an email from my wife, and she's sitting right next to me, and it's from her Gmail account, our business account, and it says, "Please see the attached," and there's a link underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm driving, I see it, and I open it up, and she's sitting next to me. She doesn't have her phone on her. I said, "Hey, guess what? You just hacked. We just got hacked." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Check this email out." I said, "Don't click the link, just open it and look at it." So it happened to us while we were driving yesterday. So we quickly, reset passwords, made some changes, and, junk mail and all that good stuff. So, I mean, it's ironic how it happens, and it happens, at a moment's notice when you're least expecting it. You're not even at your desk or at your computer. I mean, we were literally driving down the 5, and there it was. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any questions? I mean, I don't want to be the center of it all. Lauren, do you have anything? Vanessa, I know you were excited for the presentation. Do you have anything?
I don't really have a question, but one thing that I thought when we saw Krista speak up north at a Chicago Title event, one thing that was super interesting to me, and she touched on the social media aspect today, but I always notice, because obviously I'm friends with a ton of agents on social media, and she said that you have to be so careful because you're basically giving the fraudsters a timeline. Like, we're so happy we opened escrow today. So then they know within 3 days, there's going to be a transfer for deposit funds. I'm at my final walkthrough, can't wait to close. They know that there's going to be a funds closing happening in the next couple of days. So it's like agents are, trying to market themselves, but putting so much danger out there, not even realizing that they're literally giving a timeline of when these things are going to be happening. So, she said, do it after the close, but if you do anything during the transaction, just be aware that if you're providing a picture of the property and saying that you're going to be closing in a couple days, you're giving so much information without possibly
and you
realizing
tag your
it.
buyers more than likely.
Yeah. And I see it all the time. I see those posts daily. And I've told a lot of those people, be really careful, post after the funds have been sent, because it's so scary and they're not realizing what they're possibly doing to their clients.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you mentioned something about that. Like, if you're going to post something, post it a week after. And that's something that I've kind of started doing religiously, is that I'm not doing anything during the transaction, and I'm posting, okay, congratulations to my client. And I never put a last name. I always, if I'm going to put a name, I just put the first name. And then it's like 10 days later or 7 days later. So the transaction is well down the road and completed before I do something. But I really appreciate that you touched base on that, because that's super important. And I think there's a lot of people that kind of bypass that little bit of security. Mm-hmm. Well, does anyone have anything else? Judy, do you have anything additional you'd like to add?
I
No,
have
I
a
don't think
question.
so.
I
This
have
is
a question.
recorded and you're gonna send it out, right? Or what about the slide, the slides that Krista gave? Are those gonna be sent out to us?
I can provide them to Lauren in a PDF so that you guys can have it.
Okay,
Right,
thank
good
you.
question.
I would love that.
Yeah, that was a good question. I wanted to ask Krista permission for if we can share those because we have over 100 agents in some of our offices. Excuse me. And we really would like to share that. I mean, it was really, really great information. I personally want to have it on hand at all times. I'm sure Judy does too. Barbara had a question. Barbara, go ahead.
You talked about the phishing, and on Saturday night, I got a email from Amazon.com that they wanted to make sure this was my order, and it was for a computer, $1,200. And I had not ordered a computer, and it showed where it was being shipped, like to Texas or wherever. So it had a phone number. If this is not you, call this phone number. Well, the music played and played and played, and I finally thought, okay, well, I'll call. So I called my customer service number on my card, and for some odd reason, nobody was picking up the phone on Saturday night. So Sunday morning I called, and she went through my account and verified that, I didn't have any charges like that. I have a $40, $80 bill a month, and that's about it. So she told me to take that email and forward it to phishing, I think it was phishing.com. But I heard you say also to report it to the police. So how do we?
Yeah, what you can do is, so the ic3.gov website does that. Now, the interesting thing about emails is when you get a phishing email or anything of that nature, forwarding that email actually doesn't do much to help do any sort of tracking or IP analysis on that email, because as soon as you forward an email, all the header information becomes static. So what's actually better is sending it as an attachment, or depending on what type of email provider you have, there's some rules where you can get it in a text EML setting so that you provide all the header information in a way that whoever is analyzing it can actually see it. So it's something that you can Google and find out how to do, how to transfer your Gmail account, email into an EML or into a text format. You can go ahead and Google that and it'll pop up. There's about 8 steps that you have to take. But what I recommend, anytime you get any type of those emails, because we get them all the time, and my husband is notorious for, he's the Pat in our family. And so he'll I've now, he's on a rule where he's not allowed to click any links without running the email by me first, right? And so he'll show me an email. He'd be like, Krista, it says that we ordered something from Amazon. I'm like, the thing to remember is on your phones and your media devices, if you click on an email and can you guys see this? It's hard to do this right here. And if you click on who the provider is until it turns blue, and then you click it, another window will pop up and it'll actually show the email address that appears. So I encourage you guys to do that, because for most of these, 90% of those phishing accounts, that's going to let you know that it comes from something weird. Because what it was like Amazon and then it had 75 characters.com. And that was the domain that this email came from. So right away I knew it was wrong. But even if I didn't have that, always just type in the URL to go to whatever website for whatever company is trying to tell you and log in directly from that website rather than using a link to do it. Whenever you can, I encourage you to do that, because then you take away the guesswork.
That's all great.
I wished I was that smart.
You are. You just didn't think of it at that point. Hey, it was Saturday night. You were tired.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's really great. It's all great information. And as I said, I mean, I would really like to invite you back in, in first, second quarter of 21. So you could just kind of revisit everything that you've talked about, maybe add some new tidbits. But I'm sure we could spend, if this was a live forum, we would be having a whole different conversation. I think that kind of would have would have really generated a huge audience for us. So I thank you for your time. I really appreciate all your knowledge and everything that you've shared with us today. It was all excellent stuff. Really appreciate it if you would share those slides with us. It's all great information. And, you know, we look forward to seeing you in the future and future events. I'm sure Lauren is going to, you know, stay in close contact with us about what you're dealing with and what you got going on. Anyone have any last minute comments or anything before we adjourn?
Bobby, we're definitely going to have her back in 6 months. This was great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Tim is going to be the incoming chair, so you know, we'll
Yes.
we work together to have you back, and hopefully COVID goes away and we can get back together in person and we could pack the house for you, because I really do believe that if we were in person, we would really have a really great turnout. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you again, Krista. I really appreciate it.